Right now, Putin's the most dangerous, I think the most dangerous man in world history.
Yeah.
Because he's trapped and he's got nukes. And part of their doctrine is the possibility of using them.
Good God. Mike Barnacle.
Putin's impact on domestic politics. I don't know what the price of gas is in Portland, Maine this morning, but I bet you it's a lot higher than it was 2 weeks ago. What do you think the reaction is going to be among not only the people in Maine, but Americans in general? The Ukrainian people are dying. How about we have to pay a little bit more for gas, hopefully on a temporary basis? But that's the reality that we're facing. We can't sugarcoat the fact that there are going to be impacts here in this country of the various sanctions that are being applied, particularly on the energy side. But it is the comments that I've gotten so far. I mean, nobody likes the high gas prices, over $4 now, $4.20 over the weekend. But people are really committed, I think, to defending the country of Ukraine and making a contribution to do so.
But there is also some concern about what comes next, not only for the increase in gas prices that we could see nationwide, but also how to offset the loss of those Russian energy imports. There's talk among the administration potentially increasing imports from places like Venezuela, from Iran, from Saudi Arabia. But in talking to some key Senate Democrats, they're concerned about that approach.
We shouldn't be advancing other countries that don't share our values. I think that the opportunity here is to do it domestically, create jobs here, deal with it domestically, and also see if we can help Europe out too.
So the administration ease restrictions on production?
Go back to the policies that we've had before. And we have to do our leasing in the Gulf to make some, okay? BLM lands has been off target. All this has to go back into production. That's all we're asking for. And if we're asking the rest of the world to step up, let's show that we're going to step up. And any oil that's needed to our allies around the world, we produce it cleaner than anybody.
So they're asking for more domestic energy to happen, more domestic energy production.
And now this step the allies have been especially reluctant to take because energy prices are already high in the United States and in Europe, and they know that this step of banning American imports is going to have an effect. It's already had an effect on prices.
And John, as you were talking about kind of the political price here, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, Iran, if that's where the Biden administration goes to fill the gaps, how complicated is this going to get?
Well, it's very complicated because those are repugnant regimes as well. That's why there are heavy U.S. sanctions on Venezuela, Iran as well. The United States is also reaching out to Saudi Arabia, which of course has terrible record on human rights. But there are only bad options in this situation.
What can the Biden administration do to protect Americans from gas prices soaring even further, with the understanding that forever we have known that there's not a lot any administration can do it quickly?
That's the issue here. As John pointed out, the options for the Biden administration are essentially lose, lose, lose. Either we look weak with regard to Putin, or we make a deal with a different devil, Venezuela, Saudi, Iran, for example, or American consumers absorb a lot more pain. And there's no free lunch here. I think you hear a lot of Republicans arguing that there's a free lunch. Oh, we can just ramp up U.S. supply. But that's a fantasy, at least in the very near term. There's a long lag between the time that an oil producer gets out a rig, for example, leases a new rig, and we actually get additional supply online. So no matter what, there's going to be pain in the near term. Biden needs to essentially prepare Americans for that additional pain and say, look, this is the sacrifice we're making. We're not sending your sons and daughters abroad to spill their blood, but there's an economic sacrifice that you're going to have to make because prices are going to go up. There are no good options here.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong, polling has shown that Americans seem open to paying more at the pump, at least saying that maybe before it's happened, in order to do something in Ukraine, to do something to stop Vladimir Putin. But gas prices and inflation in general have already been an issue for this administration even before the war in Ukraine.
That's right. And it's one thing to give that answer to a pollster saying, should you be willing to sacrifice to help Ukraine? That sounds like the right answer. It's entirely another thing to consider the effect on public and political attitudes when those prices go up. There is nothing harder for a politician to do than to tell his constituents, I'm doing something that's going to hurt you in the pocketbook. Here's why it's worth it. That's the challenge facing Joe Biden right now.
Well, that's called leadership. In the meantime, American consumers, as we've been discussing, are already facing record pain at the pump. The national average for the price of gas in the United States has now reached an all-time high of $4.17 a gallon, according to AAA. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich has got another perspective on this, with more on this from the New Jersey Turnpike. So, Vanessa, what are you hearing there about what we've been discussing here so far, the real impact of this new ban, the real impact of high gas prices already?
Well, Americans woke up this morning, Kate, to record high gas prices. We saw a 10-cent jump overnight up to $4.17 a gallon. Right behind me, 10 cents more, $4.27 a gallon. A 10-cent jump is a lot for a month, and we saw this just in 24 hours. We also saw a 55-cent jump in prices in just the last week. People we've spoken to over the last couple weeks, they're okay paying higher prices if it means holding Russia accountable for what they are doing in Ukraine.
Thank you. By the way, everybody, a reminder here. So we're talking about gas prices here. This is a live picture coming in from a train station in Poland, showing the constant stream of refugees. 2 million Ukrainians so far seeking refuge and safety outside of their home country because of the war that is happening there. That is the reason that it seems as if the president is making this decision now to ban Russian oil imports. Important to keep that in perspective.
NATO is not going to intervene in the ground or air war in Ukraine, period. The political decision, which I personally support, was this would open World War III potentially, but certainly directly involve us in combat operations against the Russians.
Who are saying they want a no-fly zone as well, but again, so far what we're hearing from officials, they don't want to start another world war. That is news, though.
Believe me, there is no explanation.
It's awful. It's just terrible. Hanna Opko in Poland, thank you for joining us. At the very least, we're happy that you are safe right now. Thank you. Joining me now from Washington is NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbella. Heidi, thank you for being here. We have two bits of news from this story, and one of them is about oil, and I want to get to that in a second. But first, I want to talk about what Poland has just announced, that they're going to hand over their Soviet-era fighter jets to the Americans. Ukraine wants those jets. Any word if the Americans are going to hand them over to the Ukrainians?
Well, no word yet, since this is just breaking, Katie, but it does appear to be the first step in some kind of a swap here, because in order to get those jets to the Ukrainians, they'd have to be transferred conceivably by the Americans, and now the Germans are already saying that they are welcoming other countries to do the same. This potentially a remedy by the international community responding to this. The interviewee that you just had that was so compelling, that even though we ourselves don't want to put our jets in the sky, a way here to maybe make a bridge to make sure that there are jets in the sky, and this seeming to be some kind of a first step and a swap to getting them into the hands of the Ukrainians, Katie.
Yeah, it's just, I don't really know what to say about that last interview, because it's awful. I do want to ask you, Heidi, about the news on oil, banning all Russian oil. What's it going to mean? Or how did this administration come to that decision? And where are the allies on that?
Yeah, Katie, this is really one of those rare moments where we saw unity between both the business world and the political world. This comes after really a 2-week campaign on Capitol Hill that was bipartisan, saying this is something that we need to do. At the same time, industry was already moving in this direction, with BP and Exxon saying that they were going to limit oil imports and cut ties. And so this was something that the administration came to really with a pressure campaign and agreement across the board that this is something that we need to do. Now,
Joe, talk to me about gas prices.
Yeah, right here, they're $5.89 a gallon and continuing to grow across the board. You know the record number by now is $4.17 nationwide. And we've been talking to drivers all across Los Angeles to get their sense of what it does to the pocketbook, to the budget. And so far, we see overwhelming support, even though it hurts on the budget every single day, especially when you take into the account that we are still looking at inflation that is at 40-year highs. How much longer can you afford the price of gas?
I'm already stopped driving. I say at least probably about 2 more weeks. I say I could go about 2 more weeks on this. After this, I'm just going to spark the car up and just jump on the bus if it don't change.
We are worried that just you cannot do our business if the gas still going up this way.
It's a small price to pay compared to what's happening globally.
Now, small price to pay for those who can afford it, right? 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck here in the United States.